The afternoon sun was starting to set when Robert Williams turned his silver Honda onto Maple Street. His 12-year-old daughter Sophie sat in the back seat, still buzzing with excitement from her piano lesson. She'd finally mastered that difficult Chopin piece her teacher had assigned 3 weeks ago. "Dad, Mrs. Henderson said I might be ready for the spring recital," Sophie said, her voice full of hope. Robert glanced at her through the rearview mirror and smiled. "That's my girl. Your mom's going to be so proud when she hears about this." The neighborhood around them was quiet, the kind of peaceful suburban area where people jogged with their dogs and kids rode bikes on the sidewalks. Robert had worked hard to afford a house here. After serving 2 tours overseas with the Army, he'd come back determined to give his family a good life. The house was just 2 blocks away now. That's when he noticed the flashing lights behind him. Robert's heart sank a little, but he kept his cool. He'd been pulled over before and he knew the drill. Stay calm, be respectful, follow instructions. He checked his mirrors carefully and pulled over to the side of the road, making sure he was well out of the traffic lane. "Dad, why are we stopping?" Sophie asked, her earlier excitement fading into concern. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just a routine traffic stop. Nothing to worry about," Robert said, though he could feel his own tension rising. He turned off the engine and placed both hands on the steering wheel where they could be clearly seen. The officer took his time approaching the car. Robert could see him in the side mirror, a tall man with a thick build and dark sunglasses that hid his eyes. When he finally reached the driver's window, Robert had already rolled it down. "License and registration," the officer said. His voice was flat, almost bored, but there was an edge to it that made Robert uncomfortable. "Yes, sir. Officer Hanson," Robert said, reading the name tag on the man's uniform. "May I ask what I was pulled over for?" "Your taillight's broken. License and registration now." Robert frowned slightly. He'd just had his car serviced last week and everything had been fine. But he wasn't going to argue. Slowly, deliberately, he reached for his wallet in his pocket. "I'm reaching for my wallet now," Robert said clearly, making sure the officer could see every movement. "Just hurry up," Hanson snapped. As Robert handed over his documents, he tried to explain. "Officer, I actually just had my car checked last week. The mechanic didn't mention anything about the taillight." Hanson barely glanced at the license before looking back at Robert with obvious suspicion. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir. Just 2 blocks down on Oakwood Drive. My family and I moved in about 3 years ago." The officer's jaw tightened. He looked at the house number on Robert's license, then back at Robert's face as if trying to catch him in a lie. "Step out of the vehicle." Robert felt his stomach drop. "Is there a problem, officer? I gave you my license and registration." "I said step out of the vehicle. Don't make me repeat myself." Sophie's voice came from the back seat, small and scared. "Dad, it's okay, baby. Just stay in the car and don't move, all right?" Robert said, trying to keep his voice steady for her sake. He opened the door slowly and stepped out, keeping his hands visible at all times. The cool evening air hit his face as he stood on the sidewalk. Other cars passed by, their occupants glancing curiously at the scene before driving on. No one stopped. No one ever stopped. "Turn around. Hands on the car," Hanson ordered. Robert did as he was told, his military training kicking in. "Follow orders, stay calm. Don't escalate." He placed his palms flat on the hood of his car, feeling the residual warmth of the engine beneath his hands. Hanson patted him down roughly, checking his pockets with unnecessary force. "Where are you coming from?" "My daughter's piano lesson. Like I said, we live just down the street." "Piano lesson?" Hanson's tone was mocking now. "In this neighborhood? You expect me to believe that?" Robert felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. "Yes, sir. Her teacher, Mrs. Henderson, lives on Birch Avenue. We've been going there for almost 2 years now." Another patrol car pulled up behind Hanson's vehicle, and a younger officer got out. He was Asian, maybe in his late 20s, and he looked uncertain as he approached. "Everything okay here, Hanson?" the younger officer asked. "Just checking out a suspicious vehicle, Officer Chen," Hanson replied, not taking his eyes off Robert. "Guy claims he lives in the area, but something doesn't add up." Chen glanced at Robert's car, at the license plate, at Robert himself. There was something in his expression that Robert couldn't quite read. Discomfort, maybe? But the younger officer didn't say anything. "I'm not suspicious," Robert said carefully. "I'm just a father taking his daughter home from her music lesson. I'm also a veteran. I served in the Army for 8 years. Oh, so now you're a veteran?" Hansen's voice dripped with sarcasm. Let me guess, you've got a Bronze Star too? Actually, yes. And 2 Purple Hearts, Robert said quietly. It wasn't something he liked to brag about, but right now he hoped it might make a difference. It didn't. If anything, Hansen seemed more irritated. Everyone's a hero these days. You got proof of that? Not on me, no. But I can show you my military ID if you'd like. It's in my wallet. Sophie had rolled down her window now, watching everything with wide, frightened eyes. Robert could see her reflection in the car's side mirror, and his heart broke a little. This wasn't what he wanted his daughter to see. This wasn't the America he'd fought for. Dad, can we go home now? Sophie called out, her voice cracking. Stay in the car, young lady. Hansen barked at her, making her flinch. Don't talk to my daughter like that, Robert said, his voice harder now. The protective father in him was starting to override the cautious veteran. Hansen stepped closer, invading Robert's personal space. What did you just say to me? I said don't talk to my daughter like that. She's 12 years old and she's scared. I've cooperated with everything you've asked. I've answered all your questions. So please just tell me what this is really about. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Chen shifted nervously, his hand hovering near his radio. A few neighbors had started to notice the commotion now, peering out from behind curtains and half-opened doors. You think you can tell me how to do my job? Hansen's face was red now, his voice rising. You people think you can just move into neighborhoods like this and act like you own the place. There it was. The truth Robert had known from the moment he saw those flashing lights. This wasn't about a broken taillight. This wasn't about suspicious activity. This was about the color of his skin in a neighborhood where some people didn't think he belonged. Officer, I just want to take my daughter home, Robert said, trying one last time to de-escalate. Please. You'll go home when I say you can go home, Hansen shot back. Now turn around and put your hands behind your back. Am I being arrested? What are the charges? You're being detained for questioning. That's all you need to know. Robert's mind raced. He knew his rights. He knew he didn't have to submit to this. But he also knew what could happen if he didn't comply. He thought of his wife, Catherine, waiting at home. He thought of Sophie, watching this entire nightmare unfold. He thought of every news story he'd ever seen about traffic stops that ended in tragedy. So he turned around and put his hands behind his back, even though every fiber of his being told him this was wrong. Even though he'd done nothing illegal, even though he'd served his country with honor. And that's when everything changed. Robert stood there with his hands behind his back, feeling the cool metal of handcuffs biting into his wrists. This couldn't be happening, not here, not in front of his daughter, but it was real and it was happening right now. Officer Hansen, are you sure about this? Chen asked quietly, stepping closer. He's been cooperative. Maybe we should just verify his address and let him go. Hansen shot him a look that could freeze water. I didn't ask for your opinion, Chen. When you've been on the force as long as I have, then you can tell me how to handle a stop. Chen backed off, but Robert noticed something. The younger officer's hand moved to his radio again, and he pressed a button on his shoulder. Was he calling someone? Robert couldn't be sure, but something about Chen's body language suggested he wasn't comfortable with what was happening. Sophie had gotten out of the car now, despite Robert's earlier instructions. Tears were streaming down her face as she stood by the passenger door, her small hands gripping the frame. Please, sir, my dad didn't do anything wrong, she said, her voice shaking. We were just coming home from my piano lesson. Please let him go. Robert's heart shattered. His little girl shouldn't have to beg for her father's freedom. She shouldn't have to see him treated like a criminal on a public street. Sophie, baby, get back in the car. Everything's going to be okay. No, it's not okay, Sophie shouted, something fierce breaking through her fear. This isn't fair. Hansen turned his attention to her, his expression hard. Little girl, if you don't get back in that car right now, I'll have child services come pick you up for your own safety. That threat did it. Sophie's face went pale and she scrambled back into the car, slamming the door shut. Through the window, Robert could see her pulling out her phone. Smart girl. She was probably calling her mother. That was completely unnecessary, Robert said, his voice tight with controlled anger. She's just scared. You're scaring her. Maybe if you'd raised her to respect authority, she wouldn't be acting out, Hansen replied, checking the handcuffs to make sure they were secure. Too secure. They were cutting into Robert's skin. A few more neighbors had emerged from their homes now. Robert recognized one of them, Mr. Peterson, who lived 3 houses down from his own place. They'd talked over the fence a few times about lawn care and sports. Peterson stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching but not intervening, you know. I find it interesting, Hansen continued, circling around Robert like a predator, that you claim to live here, but I've never seen you before. I patrol this neighborhood regularly. I leave for work at 6 in the morning and usually don't get home until after 6 in the evening, Robert explained patiently. I work as an engineer at Davidson Tech. You can call them to verify if you want. Oh, an engineer? Really? Hansen's tone made it clear he didn't believe a word of it. So you're telling me you're a veteran and an engineer, driving this modest car, living in this expensive neighborhood? That's quite a story. It's not a story. It's my life, Robert said. His wrists were starting to hurt from the handcuffs. Look, officer, I understand you're just doing your job. But I really haven't done anything wrong. My taillight isn't even broken. You can check it yourself. Chen had walked to the back of Robert's car without being asked. He bent down, examining the taillights carefully. After a moment, he straightened up and caught Hansen's eye, giving a small shake of his head. Hansen's jaw clenched. Well, maybe I saw it flickering earlier. Either way, there are other concerns here. What concerns? Robert asked, his patience wearing thin. I've shown you my license. I've told you where I live. I've cooperated with everything you've asked. What more do you want from me? I want you to watch your tone, Hansen snapped, stepping closer. You might think you're special because you claim you served in the military, but that doesn't give you the right to question how I do my job. I'm not questioning how you do your job. I'm questioning why I'm in handcuffs for a traffic stop when I haven't broken any laws. The sun was setting lower now, casting long shadows across the street. More cars passed by, slowing down to look at the scene. Some people took out their phones, possibly recording. Robert hoped they were. He hoped someone was documenting this. A white van pulled up and parked across the street. An elderly woman got out, moving slowly but deliberately. She had silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and wore a cardigan despite the warm evening. Robert had seen her before, walking her small dog in the mornings. She lived in the large house on the corner. The woman didn't just watch. She walked straight across the street toward them, pulling out her phone and holding it up high. Excuse me, officer, she called out in a clear, authoritative voice. I'm recording this interaction. I'm Mrs. Eleanor Patterson and I live right there. She pointed to her house. I'm also a retired federal judge and what I'm witnessing right now looks an awful lot like harassment. Hansen's face went red. Ma'am, you need to step back. This is official police business. I'm on a public sidewalk, which gives me every right to observe and record, Eleanor said calmly. Now I've been watching this young man for the past 10 minutes. He's been nothing but respectful and cooperative. Why is he in handcuffs? He was pulled over for a broken taillight and suspicious behavior, Hansen said, his voice strained. What suspicious behavior? Driving while being a responsible father? Taking his daughter home from her piano lesson? Eleanor's voice had steel in it now. I know, Mrs. Henderson. That young lady in the car takes lessons from her every Thursday at 4 o'clock. I've seen this man and his daughter make that trip dozens of times. Robert felt a surge of gratitude. Finally, someone was standing up for him, someone who couldn't be dismissed or intimidated as easily as he could. Ma'am, with all due respect, you need to let me do my job, Hansen said through gritted teeth. With all due respect, officer, I am letting you do your job. I'm just making sure you do it correctly and lawfully, Eleanor replied. She turned slightly, addressing Chen. Young man, you look uncomfortable. Is there something about this stop that bothers you? Chen opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked between Hansen and Eleanor, clearly torn. Inside the car, Sophie had her phone pressed to her ear. Robert could see her lips moving rapidly. She'd definitely gotten through to someone. Probably Catherine. His wife would be here soon, and when she arrived, there would be hell to pay. Catherine was a civil rights attorney, and she didn't tolerate injustice quietly. Look, this is getting ridiculous, Robert said, trying to bring some reason back to the situation. Officer Hansen, you've run my license. You know I'm telling the truth about who I am. Mrs. Patterson here has vouched for me. My daughter is terrified. Can we please just end this? Remove the handcuffs and I'll be on my way. I'll decide when you're free to go, Hansen said. But there was less confidence in his voice now. The presence of Eleanor and her recording phone had clearly affected him. What's your badge number, officer? Eleanor asked, her phone still recording. I want to make sure I include it in my report. Your report? Hanson's voice rose. What report? The one I'll be filing with the police department, the city council, and the FBI if necessary, Eleanor said matter-of-factly. I've seen enough misconduct in my 30 years on the bench to recognize it when it's happening right in front of me. Robert noticed something then. 3 cars had pulled up and parked along the street. They weren't regular cars. They were dark sedans with tinted windows. People were inside, but they weren't getting out yet. Just watching, waiting. Chen had noticed them too. He'd gone very still, his hand still near his radio. There was something knowing in his expression, like he'd been expecting this. The air felt different now, charged, like something big was about to happen. Officer Hanson, Robert said quietly, I think you should probably let me go now. But Hanson wasn't listening. He was staring at Robert with open hostility, all pretense of professionalism gone. You think you can come into neighborhoods like this and act like you belong here? You think having some fancy job and a veteran status makes you special? I think being an American citizen gives me the right to live wherever I can afford to live, Robert replied, his own anger finally breaking through. I think serving my country should mean something. I think being a good father and a law-abiding citizen should be enough. Should be. But isn't, Hanson said, and there was something almost triumphant in his voice, like he'd finally gotten Robert to show some emotion. This is outrageous, Eleanor said, still recording. Young man, I want you to know that you have witnesses here. Whatever happens next, there are people who see the truth of this situation. Sophie had rolled down her window again. My mom's coming, she announced, her voice stronger now. She's a lawyer and she's really, really mad. Robert almost smiled despite everything. Yes, Catherine would be mad. And when Catherine got mad about injustice, she was a force of nature. The dark sedans were still there, their occupants still watching. Chen kept glancing at them, then at his watch as if timing something, and Hanson, oblivious to it all, was about to make the biggest mistake of his career. The tension on Maple Street had reached a breaking point. Robert stood in handcuffs, his daughter crying in the car, a retired judge recording everything, and mysterious dark sedans watching from a distance. But Officer Hanson seemed determined to push things even further. Am I being charged with something? Robert asked, keeping his voice as level as possible. Because if I'm not, then I have the right to know if I'm free to leave. You're not going anywhere until I say so. Hanson shot back. That's not how the law works. Officer, Eleanor interjected, her phone still held high. You need probable cause to detain someone. A non-existent broken taillight doesn't qualify. Hanson whipped around to face her. Lady, I'm warning you for the last time. Stop interfering with my work or I'll arrest you for obstruction. I'd like to see you try, Eleanor said calmly. I've dealt with bullies in uniforms before, young man. You don't scare me. Robert could see Hanson's control slipping. The officer's face was flushed, his breathing heavy. This was bad. Robert had seen men lose control before, during his time in the service. He knew the signs. Someone was about to do something they'd regret. Look, Robert said, trying to de-escalate one more time. I just want to go home to my family. If you need to write me a ticket for something, write it. If you need to verify my information, verify it. But please, can we handle this professionally? Professionally? Hanson laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk to me about being professional? You standing here acting like you're better than me with your veteran status and your fancy job? I never said I was better than anyone, Robert replied, confused by the accusation. I just want to be treated fairly. Fairly? Hanson stepped closer, invading Robert's personal space again. You people always want special treatment. Always playing the victim. Those words hit Robert like a punch. You people. There it was again, clearer than before. This wasn't about a traffic stop. This was about something much deeper and uglier. Officer Hanson. Chen spoke up, his voice uncertain but concerned. Maybe we should just let him go. He's clearly not a threat, and we verified his information. I don't remember asking for your input, Hanson snarled without looking at him. A sleek black car pulled up fast, tires squealing slightly as it came to a stop behind Robert's Honda. Catherine Williams jumped out, her professional attire slightly rumpled from the rushed drive. Her eyes swept the scene, taking in everything in seconds. Her husband in handcuffs, her daughter in tears. The recording judge, the watching neighbors, what is going on here? Catherine demanded, her voice sharp and authoritative. She walked straight up to Hanson, fearless. I'm Catherine Williams, attorney at law. That's my husband you have in handcuffs. What are the charges? Ma'am, step back. This doesn't concern you, Hanson said. That's my husband. It absolutely concerns me, Catherine said, pulling out her own phone and starting to record. I'll ask again. What are the charges against my husband? He was pulled over for a broken taillight and suspicious activity, Hanson repeated, sounding less sure of himself now. Suspicious activity? He was driving home with our daughter from her piano lesson. The same route he takes every Thursday, Catherine said. And I can see his taillights from here. They're both functioning perfectly. Sophie had gotten out of the car again and ran to her mother, wrapping her arms around her waist. Mom, he was mean to Dad. He was so mean. And Dad didn't do anything wrong. Catherine held her daughter with one arm while keeping her phone trained on Hanson with the other. Officer, I'm going to need your badge number right now. I don't have to give you anything, Hanson said, but he was starting to look worried. The situation was spiraling away from his control. Actually, you do, Eleanor called out. It's public information and any citizen has the right to request it. Robert watched his wife, feeling a mix of pride and concern. Catherine was fierce when it came to justice, but he didn't want her to become a target too. Catherine, it's okay. Just let it go. No, Robert, it's not okay, Catherine said firmly. This is exactly the kind of abuse of power that I fight against every day in court. I'm not letting it happen to my own family. Hanson pointed a finger at Catherine. Your attitude is exactly the problem. No respect for law enforcement. Respect is earned, officer. And right now you're not earning any, Catherine replied without backing down. That's when Robert made his mistake. He'd been quiet and cooperative for so long, but seeing his wife and daughter both in distress, something inside him broke. Officer Hanson, please, Robert said, his voice rising slightly. Just let me go. I'm asking you as one human being to another. This has gone on long enough. You don't get to tell me what to do. Hanson exploded, his face now completely red. I'm sick of people like you thinking you can question my authority. I'm the law here. You're not above the law, Robert replied, his own frustration finally showing through. Nobody is. I have rights and you're violating them. Rights? Hanson grabbed Robert by the collar of his shirt, pulling him forward roughly. Let me tell you something about rights. Everything happened in slow motion after that. Hanson raised his hand and before anyone could react, he slapped Robert hard across the face. The sound echoed down the quiet street like a gunshot. Robert's head snapped to the side from the force and he felt something warm trickling from the corner of his mouth. Blood. Sophie screamed. Catherine gasped. Eleanor's voice rang out. I got that on video. That's assault. Chen immediately stepped back, his face pale with shock. His hand went to his radio and this time he spoke clearly into it. Code 77 Bravo. Officer needs immediate supervisor. Situation has escalated. Robert stood there, his face stinging, blood on his lips, still in handcuffs. He hadn't fought back. He couldn't fight back. Fighting back would only make things worse. But the humiliation, the injustice of it all crashed over him like a wave. You just assaulted my husband. Catherine's voice was shaking with fury. In front of witnesses, on camera. You're done. Hanson seemed to realize what he'd done. His hand was still raised and he lowered it slowly, looking at it as if it belonged to someone else. But instead of apologizing, instead of backing down, he doubled down. He was resisting, Hanson said, his voice desperate now. You all saw it. He was being aggressive. That's a lie, Eleanor shouted. I recorded everything. He didn't resist at all. You just assaulted an innocent man for no reason other than your own prejudice. Dad. Sophie broke away from her mother and tried to run to Robert, but Catherine held her back. Stay here, baby, Catherine said, though her eyes never left Hanson. Officer, I'm placing you on notice. This incident will be reported to your superiors, to the district attorney, and to every civil rights organization I have contact with. You just ended your career. But something strange was happening. Those dark sedans that had been parked down the street suddenly came to life. Engines started. Doors opened. Men and women in dark suits began emerging, all wearing the same serious expressions. Chen straightened up and Robert saw something change in his posture. He no longer looked like an uncertain young officer. He looked purposeful, almost relieved. The people from the sedans walked toward them with deliberate steps. Robert counted at least 8 of them. They moved like professionals, like people who knew exactly what they were doing and had been waiting for exactly this moment. Leading them was a tall black woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a dark suit and carried herself with absolute authority. In her hand was a leather credential holder, which she held up as she approached. FBI, she announced, her voice carrying clearly down the street. Special Agent Victoria Reeves. Officer Hansen, step away from the detainee immediately. Hansen's face went from red to white in an instant. FBI, what are you doing here? Something we should have done months ago, Agent Reeves replied, her eyes cold. Officer Derek Hansen, you're under arrest. The world seemed to stop spinning. Robert stood there, blood still on his lip, unable to process what he was hearing. FBI, arrest? What was happening? Chen walked over to Agent Reeves and nodded. She nodded back, and that's when Robert understood. Chen wasn't just a regular officer. He was with them. He'd been working with them. 2 FBI agents moved to Hansen, who suddenly looked small and scared. Wait, there's been a mistake, he stammered. I was just doing my job. Your job doesn't include assault, harassment, and civil rights violations, Agent Reeves said. We've been watching you for 6 months, Hansen. We've documented 47 incidents of abuse. But this one we got on multiple cameras with multiple witnesses, including a federal judge. She turned to look at Eleanor, who was still recording and now had a small smile on her face. Good to see you again, Judge Patterson. Good to see you too, Victoria, Eleanor replied. Glad I could help. Another agent approached Robert with a key. Sir, let's get these handcuffs off you. I apologize for what you've been through. As the cuffs came off, Robert rubbed his wrists, still trying to understand what was happening. Catherine rushed to him, examining his face where Hansen had hit him. We need to document this injury, Agent Reeves said. Mr. Williams, I know this has been traumatic, but I need you to know that your assault just became the final piece of evidence we needed to bring down an entire network of corrupt officers. The street had transformed into something out of a crime drama. FBI agents moved with practiced efficiency, securing the scene and taking statements. Officer Hansen sat in the back of one of the dark sedans, his head down, no longer the aggressive man who'd terrorized Robert just minutes before. Robert sat on the curb, an FBI medic checking his split lip and taking photos of the injury. Sophie clung to his side, refusing to let go, while Catherine stood nearby coordinating with Agent Reeves. Eleanor Patterson had been invited to sit in one of the FBI vehicles to give her statement, but she'd refused, insisting on standing as a visible witness to everything happening. Mr. Williams, Agent Reeves said, kneeling down beside him. I know you have a lot of questions. I promise we'll answer all of them, but first, I need to make sure you and your family are okay. Robert nodded slowly, still processing everything. I'm fine, just confused. How long have you been watching this street? Not just this street. We've been watching Hansen and a network of officers like him for the past 6 months, Agent Reeves explained. This neighborhood happens to be part of our surveillance zone because we had reason to believe certain officers were targeting residents in affluent areas. Targeting them how? Catherine asked, her attorney instincts kicking in. Agent Reeves stood and addressed both of them. Harassment, intimidation, in some cases, false arrests and planted evidence. Officers would pull over minority residents, claim they looked suspicious in their own neighborhoods and either extort money from them or arrest them on fabricated charges. Robert felt sick. How many people? Hansen alone has 47 documented victims that we know of. Some were too scared to come forward. Others paid him off to make the problem go away. A few ended up with criminal records for crimes they didn't commit. Agent Reeves said, her expression grim. You're the first one we caught him assaulting on camera with multiple angles and witnesses. Sophie looked up at her father. Dad, you're a hero. No, sweetheart. I'm not a hero. I'm just a guy who got pulled over, Robert said softly, stroking her hair. But you are a hero, Eleanor Patterson interjected, walking over to them. She'd finally put her phone away, but Robert knew the recording was safely stored. You kept your composure in an impossible situation. You protected your daughter while standing up for your rights. That takes courage. Catherine squeezed Robert's shoulder. She's right. A lot of men would have lost their temper and made things worse. But you stayed calm. I stayed calm because I was terrified, Robert admitted. I kept thinking about all the news stories I've seen, all the families who've lost fathers, sons, brothers because a traffic stop went wrong. I just wanted to make it home alive. The words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Agent Reeves looked at him with understanding in her eyes. That's exactly why we're doing this. No one should have to fear for their life during a routine traffic stop. Chen approached them, looking nervous. Up close, Robert could see he was probably younger than he'd initially thought, maybe 27 or 28. Mr. Williams, I owe you an apology. I'm Special Agent James Chen, working undercover. I've been partnered with Hansen for 3 months documenting his behavior. I hated every second of watching him treat people the way he treated you. Why didn't you stop him sooner? Sophie asked, her voice small but accusing. Chen looked pained. Because we needed enough evidence to not just arrest Hansen but to expose the entire network. One incident might get dismissed as a bad day or a misunderstanding, but a pattern of behavior, documented over time with multiple victims, that can't be explained away. He's right, Catherine said, though she didn't sound happy about it. I've worked enough civil rights cases to know that proving systematic abuse requires systematic evidence. We've been recording everything, Agent Reeves added. Every stop, every interaction. We have audio, video, and Chen's detailed reports. But assault is a line we hoped Hansen would never cross. When he did, I gave the order to move in immediately. Robert touched his lip gingerly. It had stopped bleeding, but it still hurt. So, what happens now? Now we build the case, Agent Reeves said. Hansen will be charged with assault, civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and conspiracy. We'll also be arresting 11 other officers who've been part of this network. Some of them are patrol officers like Hansen. Others are higher up in the department. How high up? Catherine asked sharply. Agent Reeves smiled slightly. Let's just say there are going to be some significant vacancies in the police department soon. More FBI vehicles had arrived, and agents were canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking for statements. Several neighbors had come out, including Mr. Peterson, who looked embarrassed as he approached. Robert, I'm sorry, Peterson said, standing awkwardly a few feet away. I saw what was happening, but I didn't know what to do. I should have said something. Robert looked at him for a long moment. Part of him wanted to be angry, to ask why none of his neighbors had stepped up when he needed them, but he was too tired for anger. It's okay, Tom. I understand. It's not okay, Eleanor said firmly. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity. That's a lesson we should all remember. Peterson nodded, chastened. You're right. I'll do better. An FBI agent approached with a tablet. Ma'am, we need you to review your recording and provide a statement. Eleanor nodded. Of course, but I want to make sure this young man and his family have everything they need first. We're taking care of them, Agent Reeves assured her. Judge Patterson, thank you for your intervention. Your presence and recording may have prevented this situation from escalating even further. I was just doing what any decent person should do, Eleanor replied. She turned to Robert and handed him a business card. Young man, I'm retired, but I still have connections. If you need anything at all, you call me. Understand? Robert took the card, feeling overwhelmed by her kindness. Thank you, I don't know what to say. Don't say anything, just make sure you follow through with the case. Don't let them pressure you into settling quietly or dropping charges, Eleanor said. What happened here tonight is part of a much bigger problem, and people like you speaking out can help change things. Catherine was already thinking along the same lines. We'll be filing a civil suit against the department, and I'll be reaching out to other victims, offering to represent them pro bono if needed. There's something else you should know, Agent Reeves said, lowering her voice slightly. This case is going to get a lot of attention, media attention. Your name will be in the news, your face will be on TV. Are you prepared for that? Robert hadn't thought about that. He looked at Sophie, who was still holding on to him tightly. I don't want to be famous, I just want to live my life in peace. I understand, but unfortunately, you don't have much choice now, Agent Reeves said gently. The moment that video goes public, which it will because Judge Patterson's recording, Will be evidence in a federal case. This story will spread. You need to be ready for that. Catherine nodded. We'll handle it. I know some good PR people who specialize in helping families navigate high-profile cases. And Robert has nothing to hide. He's a decorated veteran, an engineer, a good father. Let people see that. Your military record is impressive, Agent Chen said. 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star. When people hear about that, they'll be outraged that a veteran was treated this way. I shouldn't need medals for people to care, Robert said quietly. I should be treated with dignity because I'm a human being. You're absolutely right, Agent Reeves agreed. But we live in an imperfect world. Sometimes, unfortunately, people need those extra details to feel empathy. It's wrong, but it's reality. A news van pulled up at the end of the street and a reporter with a cameraman started setting up. Agent Reeves sighed. That was fast. Someone must have called them. What do we tell them? Catherine asked. Nothing for now. Let us handle the media, Agent Reeves said. We'll issue an official statement later tonight. For now, I want to get you and your family away from here. Where are we going? Sophie asked. Home, Robert said. We're going home. But Agent Reeves shook her head. Actually, I'd like you to come to our field office first. We need to take detailed statements from all of you while everything is fresh. It won't take long and we'll have someone drive you home afterward. Robert looked at Catherine, who nodded. It's the right thing to do. The more detailed our statements, the stronger the case. Eleanor stepped forward one more time. Before you go, I want you to remember something. What happened here tonight was wrong. It was evil. But you faced it with grace and dignity. You showed your daughter how to stand up for what's right without losing yourself in the process. That's something to be proud of. Robert felt tears prickling at his eyes. He'd been holding everything together, staying strong for Sophie. But Eleanor's words cracked something open inside him. I was so scared. I kept thinking I might not make it home. But you did, Eleanor said softly. And now you have a chance to make sure fewer people have to feel that fear. Agent Reeves gave them a moment, then gently guided them toward one of the FBI vehicles. Come on, let's get you out of here. They walked toward the car. Robert looked back at Maple Street. His Honda was still parked where he'd been pulled over, evidence tape now surrounding it. The FBI field office was nothing like Robert had imagined. He'd seen police stations in movies, all harsh fluorescent lights and cold metal furniture, but this building felt different, more professional, almost corporate. They were led to a comfortable conference room with soft lighting and leather chairs. Sophie had fallen asleep against Catherine's shoulder during the car ride over. An FBI agent who specialized in working with children had offered to take her to a quieter room with a TV and some snacks, but Sophie had refused to leave her parents. So she sat curled up in a chair, exhausted from the emotional ordeal. Agent Reeves entered carrying a laptop and several thick folders. Another agent followed with bottles of water and a first aid kit. Let's get that lip properly cleaned up, she said, nodding to the medic who'd accompanied them. As the medic worked on Robert's face, Agent Reeves set up her laptop and opened one of the folders. Before we take your formal statements, I think you deserve to understand exactly what you walked into tonight. Catherine leaned forward, her attorney instincts alert. We're listening. Agent Reeves turned the laptop screen toward them. On it was a map of their city, covered with dozens of red dots. Each of these dots represents an incident we've documented over the past 6 months. Traffic stops, pedestrian stops, property checks, all involving minority residents in predominantly white neighborhoods. Robert stared at the map. There were so many dots. All of these were Hansen? Hansen accounts for 47 of them. The rest involved 10 other officers working in coordination. Agent Reeves explained. They had a system. They'd target people who looked like they didn't belong, people who were often too scared or too unfamiliar with their rights to fight back. What exactly were they doing? Catherine asked. Agent Reeves clicked to another file. It varied. Sometimes they'd demand to see proof that the person lived in the area, then claim the proof was insufficient. They'd threaten arrest, impound vehicles, call child services. In several cases, they planted small amounts of illegal substances in vehicles, giving them grounds for arrest. Robert felt his stomach turn. They planted drugs? 3 confirmed cases, possibly more, Agent Reeves said grimly. One man spent 4 months in jail before the charges were dropped. By then, he'd lost his job and his apartment. Another woman had her children temporarily removed by child services after officers claimed they found substance abuse paraphernalia in her car that she swears wasn't hers. "This is systematic corruption," Catherine said, her voice hard. "How did it go on for so long?" "Because the victims were carefully chosen," Agent Chen said, entering the room. "People who were new to the area, people who didn't know their neighbors well yet, people who might have immigration concerns or past legal troubles that made them reluctant to go to the authorities. But Robert doesn't fit that profile," Catherine pointed out. "We've lived here for 3 years. We're established in the community." Agent Reeves nodded, which is why Hansen's behavior tonight was so reckless. He was getting bold, getting careless. We'd noticed it in recent weeks. His targets were becoming less selective, his behavior more aggressive. "Why?" Robert asked. "What was the point of all this?" "Money, primarily," Agent Reeves said. "In at least 20 cases, victims paid officers cash to make problems go away. Small amounts, usually a few $100s. Never enough to seem worth reporting or fighting. But it adds up." She pulled out a document showing bank records. "We've tracked over $40,000 flowing to accounts connected to these officers over the past 2 years. And that's just what we can prove," Catherine whistled low. "Extortion, racketeering, civil rights violations. You're building a federal case." "Yes, but it's more than just money," Agent Chen added. "Some of these officers genuinely believed they were protecting their neighborhoods. They saw minority residents as threats, as people who didn't belong. The money was almost secondary to the power trip." Robert thought about Hansen's words, his tone, his anger. He kept saying, "you people." He really believed I didn't have the right to be there. "We've documented similar language from multiple officers," Agent Reeves confirmed. "Which is why this isn't just about corruption. It's about systematic discrimination hidden behind badges and authority." She opened another file, this one containing photos. Robert recognized some of the faces. A young black man in a business suit, an Asian woman with 2 kids, a Hispanic family standing beside their car. "These are some of Hansen's other victims," Agent Reeves said softly. "We've been working to identify and contact all of them. Many were too scared to come forward initially, but as our investigation progressed, more people started talking." One photo caught Robert's attention. A man who looked to be in his 60s wearing a veteran's cap. "Him too?" "Thomas Bradley. Retired Marine, pulled over by Hansen 3 months ago," Agent Reeves said. Hansen claimed his temporary registration was fake, threatened to impound his car. Mr. Bradley ended up paying $300 to make it go away. "I could have been him," Robert said quietly. "If the FBI hadn't been watching, if Judge Patterson hadn't intervened, I could have just become another victim nobody heard about." "That's exactly right," Agent Reeves said. "Which is why your case is so important. You have credibility. You have witnesses. You have video evidence that can't be disputed. Your assault is the linchpin that holds this entire case together." Catherine straightened up. "You need Robert to testify. Not just testify. We need him to be the face of this case," Agent Reeves said. "I know that's asking a lot. I know you just want to go home and forget this ever happened. But you have an opportunity to help dozens of other people get justice." Robert looked at his sleeping daughter, her face peaceful now despite the trauma she'd witnessed. What kind of world was he leaving for her? What kind of man did he want to be? "There's something else you should know," Agent Chen said hesitantly. "Hansen isn't the biggest fish in this operation." "What do you mean?" Catherine asked. Agent Reeves pulled out another document. "We have evidence that suggests involvement from someone higher up in the department. Someone who was protecting these officers, covering up complaints, reassigning investigations." "Who?" Robert asked. "We can't reveal that yet." "The investigation is ongoing," Agent Reeves said. "But I can tell you that tonight's events have accelerated our timeline. We'll be making multiple arrests over the next 48 hours. Catherine's eyes widened. "Multiple arrests? How many people are involved?" 12 officers, 1 sergeant, and we believe at least 1 person in administration," Agent Reeves said. "It's going to send shockwaves through the entire department." Robert tried to process this. What had seemed like one bad cop was actually a whole network of corruption. "How did you even start investigating this?" "A complaint from a victim's family member who happened to be a federal prosecutor," Agent Reeves explained. Her brother was stopped by Hansen and she recognized it for what it was. She brought it to us and we started digging. Once we started looking, we found patterns, Agent Chen added. Too many stops in certain neighborhoods. Too many complaints that went nowhere. Too many victims who seemed to just disappear from the system. Disappear? Catherine's voice was sharp. Not literally, Agent Reeves assured her. But their complaints would be lost, or they'd be convinced to drop charges, or they'd be intimidated into silence. The system was working exactly as it was designed to work, to protect itself. Robert felt a deep anger building inside him. So how many people suffered because the system failed them? We've identified 47 direct victims of Hansen alone, Agent Reeves said. But the true number across all the officers involved is likely over 100. And those are just the ones we know about. The room fell silent. Robert thought about all those people, all those families who'd gone through what he'd just experienced. How many of them had been too scared to speak up? How many had just paid the money and tried to move on? How many were still dealing with the consequences of false arrests or criminal records they didn't deserve? I'll do it, Robert said suddenly. I'll testify. I'll be the face of this case. Whatever you need. Catherine looked at him, concerned. Robert, are you sure? This is going to be hard. The media attention, the scrutiny, the pressure. I'm sure, Robert said. Because if I just take a settlement and stay quiet, then what was the point? Hansen will just be one bad cop who got fired. The system will go on protecting itself. But if I speak up, if I help expose all of this, maybe it means something. Agent Reeves smiled, and for the first time that night it reached her eyes. Thank you. You have no idea how much this means. I have one condition, Robert said. I want to meet the other victims. I want to hear their stories, and I want to help them however I can. We can arrange that, Agent Reeves agreed. In fact, I think it would help the case, showing the pattern, the systematic nature of what was happening. Catherine pulled out her phone. I'll start drafting a lawsuit against the department. Class action representing all the victims. We'll hit them so hard they'll have no choice but to implement real reform. That's the spirit, Agent Reeves said. But be prepared for pushback. The police union will fight this. There are people in the city government who won't want this exposed. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. 3 days after the incident, Robert's face was everywhere. The video of Hansen slapping him had gone viral, shared millions of times across social media. News outlets ran the story around the clock. Decorated veteran assaulted by officer during routine stop, read the headlines. FBI arrests 12 officers in corruption scandal, said others. Robert sat in his living room watching the news coverage with a mix of disbelief and exhaustion. Catherine was on the phone in the kitchen, fielding calls from reporters, civil rights organizations, and other attorneys wanting to help with the case. Sophie was at school, though they'd debated keeping her home after several reporters had shown up at the school gates. The doorbell rang for the 20th time that morning. Robert peeked through the window and saw a CNN news van parked outside. He didn't answer. Agent Reeves had assigned 2 FBI agents to watch the house, and they gently redirected the reporters away. His phone buzzed with another text message. This one was from his old army buddy David, who lived in Texas now. Saw the news. Can't believe what happened to you. You doing okay, brother? Robert typed back, hanging in there. It's been crazy. The truth was, he wasn't sure how he felt. Angry, definitely, violated, but also strangely empowered. The story had touched a nerve across the country. People from all walks of life were reaching out with support, sharing their own stories of police misconduct, demanding change. Catherine came into the room, ending her call. That was the mayor's office. They want to meet with us. What do they want? Robert asked. Damage control, probably, Catherine said, sitting beside him on the couch. The city is in crisis mode. The police department is a mess. Half the city council is calling for the police chief to resign. Has he? Not yet, but it's coming, Catherine said. Agent Reeves called earlier. They've arrested 9 of the 12 officers so far. The other 3 are in hiding, but they'll find them. Robert's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but the area code was local. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Williams? This is Patricia Gonzalez. You don't know me, but Officer Hansen pulled me over 6 months ago. Robert sat up straighter. What happened? Patricia's voice was shaky. He said I was driving suspiciously in a neighborhood where my sister lives. I was visiting her after she had surgery. He made me wait on the side of the road for an hour. questioned me about whether I really belonged there, searched my car without permission. Finally, he said I could go if I paid him $200 for what he called an administrative fee. Did you pay it? Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. Yes. I was scared. I'm here on a work visa, and I thought if I caused trouble it might affect my immigration status. So I paid him and never told anyone, Patricia said, starting to cry. When I saw what happened to you on the news, I realized I wasn't the only one. I'm so sorry I didn't speak up sooner. Don't apologize, Robert said firmly. You were scared. That's what they counted on. That's how they got away with it for so long. I want to help now, Patricia said. I want to testify. I want to make sure he never does this to anyone else. Robert gave her Catherine's contact information. After he hung up, Catherine looked at him with understanding. That's the third victim who's called you directly today. How are they getting my number? Robert asked. Social media, probably. Or they're asking around, Catherine said. Word is spreading that you're willing to help other victims. Your name is out there now. That was what worried Robert. His name was out there. His face was on TV. His story was being discussed in homes across America. Some of the attention was positive, people praising his composure and courage, but there was negative attention too. Online comments ranged from supportive to vicious. Some people accused him of exaggerating, of playing the victim, of trying to get a settlement. Others made racist comments saying Hansen had probably had good reason to be suspicious. The ugliness of some people's responses shocked him. Don't read the comments, Catherine advised, seeing his face. They're not worth your mental health. I'm not, Robert lied. But he had been, and it was eating at him. The doorbell rang again. This time, one of the FBI agents knocked and called through the door. Mr. Williams, there's someone here you'll want to see. Robert opened the door to find Judge Eleanor Patterson standing on his porch, holding a casserole dish. Behind her were two other people he didn't recognize. I hope you don't mind us dropping by, Eleanor said warmly. I brought food. I figured with everything going on, cooking is probably the last thing on your mind. Robert stepped aside to let them in. Eleanor introduced her companions. This is Thomas Bradley, the veteran I mentioned, and this is Lisa Chen, another one of Hansen's victims. Thomas was the older man Robert had seen in the FBI photos, the Marine with the veteran's cap. Lisa was a young woman, probably in her late 20s, with nervous eyes. I'm sorry to intrude, Thomas said, shaking Robert's hand. But when I heard what happened to you, I had to come. I had to tell you that what you're doing matters. They settled in the living room. Catherine brought coffee while Eleanor set up the casserole in the kitchen. It felt surreal, these strangers gathered in his home, connected by shared trauma. Hansen got me 3 months ago, Thomas began. Said my temporary registration looked fake. Threatened to tow my car, which I'd just bought and couldn't afford to lose. I paid him $300 cash right there on the street. Did you report it? Robert asked. Thomas shook his head, ashamed. I'm 72 years old. I did 2 tours in Vietnam. I've seen a lot in my life. But I was scared. Scared of what might happen if I made a fuss. So I paid and tried to forget about it. Lisa spoke up next, her voice barely above a whisper. Hansen pulled me over 8 months ago. He said my car matched a description of a vehicle involved in a robbery. He searched my car and suddenly he found a small bag of drugs in my glove compartment. But it wasn't yours, Catherine asked gently. No, I don't use drugs. I never have, Lisa said, tears in her eyes. But who would believe me? A 28-year-old woman against a police officer? I was arrested, spent a night in jail. The charges were eventually dropped due to lack of evidence, but the arrest is still on my record. I lost my job because of it. Robert felt his anger rising again. These were real people with real lives that had been damaged by Hansen's abuse of power. I'm so sorry that happened to you. It's not your fault, Lisa said. But seeing you stand up to him, seeing him actually face consequences, it gave me hope. It made me realize that maybe I could speak up too. Eleanor returned from the kitchen. There are dozens more like them. People who've been hurt by this system. Your case has opened the floodgates, Robert. People are finally feeling brave enough to come forward. That's a lot of responsibility, Robert said quietly. You didn't ask for it, Eleanor agreed, but you have it anyway. The question is what you do with it. Over the next few hours, more victims arrived. Some Eleanor had contacted, others had heard through word of mouth. By evening, there were 15 people in Robert's home, all with similar stories of abuse, intimidation, and injustice. Catherine took notes documenting each case. building what would become a massive civil rights lawsuit. The FBI had already contacted most of these people, but hearing their stories directly, seeing their faces, made it real in a way that documents couldn't. A young father named Christopher told of being pulled over with his infant son in the car. Hansen had made him stand in the cold for over an hour while he ran checks, claiming Christopher's license seemed suspicious. The baby had cried the entire time. An elderly woman named Ruth described being stopped while walking to her daughter's house just 2 blocks away. Hansen had demanded to see identification, questioned why she was in the neighborhood, and only let her go after she'd called her daughter to come verify her story. Each story added another layer to the picture of systematic abuse. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a deliberate pattern designed to intimidate and control. "We need to organize," Catherine said as the evening wore on. "We need to present a united front. Robert's case is getting the media attention, but all of you deserve to be heard." Thomas nodded. "What do you suggest?" "A press conference," Catherine said. "All the victims together. Show the city, show the country that this wasn't about one bad cop. This was about a broken system that needs to be fixed." The group agreed. Agent Reeves, who'd stopped by earlier, had already coordinated with the FBI to make space available for such an event. It would happen in 3 days, giving them time to prepare statements and coordinate with the media. As people started to leave, each one thanked Robert personally. Some hugged him. Others just shook his hand. But all of them looked at him with something he hadn't expected: hope. After everyone had gone, Robert sat on his porch watching the sunset. Catherine joined him, wrapping a blanket around both of them. "You okay?" she asked. "I don't know," Robert admitted. "A week ago I was just a guy living my life. Now I'm some kind of symbol for a movement I didn't even know existed." "You don't have to be a symbol," Catherine said. "You can just be Robert, a good man who stood up for what was right when it mattered." "Is it going to be enough?" Robert asked. "All these people coming forward, all this attention, will it actually change anything?" The press conference was held at the Federal Building downtown, and the turnout was massive. News cameras lined the back of the room. Reporters filled every seat. National networks had sent their top correspondents. What had started as a local story had become a national conversation about police reform and civil rights. Robert stood backstage with Catherine, Agent Reeves, and 15 other victims who'd agreed to speak publicly. His hands were sweating. He'd faced enemy fire overseas, but somehow this felt more terrifying. "You don't have to do this," Catherine whispered, squeezing his hand. "We can still back out." But Robert shook his head. Behind him stood Thomas, the elderly Marine. Beside him was Lisa, the young woman whose life had been derailed by false charges. Patricia, who'd paid the bribe. Christopher, who'd been humiliated in front of his infant son. They were all counting on him. "No backing out," Robert said. "We're doing this." Agent Reeves stepped up to the podium first. "Good morning. 3 days ago, Officer Derek Hansen of the City Police Department assaulted Mr. Robert Williams during what should have been a routine traffic stop. What many people don't know is that this assault was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of systematic abuse that has affected dozens of residents in our community." She laid out the basics of the investigation, careful not to reveal anything that might compromise the ongoing criminal cases. Then she introduced Catherine, who spoke about the civil lawsuit they were filing on behalf of all the victims. "This isn't just about money," Catherine said, her voice strong and clear. "This is about accountability. This is about making sure that what happened to these people never happens again. We're seeking comprehensive reform of the police department, including independent oversight, mandatory body cameras, and real consequences for officers who abuse their power." Then it was Robert's turn. He walked to the podium and the camera flashes were blinding. For a moment he couldn't see anything but white light. Then his vision cleared and he saw the faces in the crowd. Some sympathetic, some skeptical, all waiting to hear what he had to say. "My name is Robert Williams," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I'm a father, a husband, an engineer, and a veteran. 3 days ago I was assaulted by a police officer for no reason other than driving through my own neighborhood." He told his story simply, without embellishment. He talked about Sophie crying in the car. He talked about the fear he'd felt, the helplessness of being handcuffed and unable to protect himself. He talked about the moment Hansen's hand connected with his face, But my story isn't unique, Robert continued. Behind me are 15 other people with similar experiences. Some paid bribes, some were arrested on false charges. All of them were targeted because someone decided they didn't belong in their own communities. One by one, the other victims came forward to share their stories. Thomas spoke about the shame of paying off a cop at 72 years old. Lisa broke down in tears as she described losing her job. Patricia talked about the fear she'd lived with for months, worried about her immigration status. The room was completely silent except for their voices. Even the reporters, usually so quick to shout questions, just listened. When the last victim had spoken, Catherine returned to the podium. Officer Hansen is in custody, facing multiple criminal charges. 11 other officers have also been arrested. But this isn't over. We're calling for the immediate resignation of Police Chief Ronald Morrison, who we believe knew about this pattern of abuse and did nothing to stop it. That caused a stir in the room. The police chief resigning was a huge ask. Morrison had been with the department for 30 years, and he had powerful allies in the city government. Furthermore, Catherine continued, we're calling for a complete review of every arrest, every citation, and every complaint involving these 12 officers for the past 5 years. We believe there are more victims who haven't come forward yet, and they deserve justice too. The question and answer session that followed was intense. Reporters asked about the FBI investigation, the criminal charges, the civil lawsuit. Some questions were sympathetic. Others were challenging, even hostile. Mr. Williams, some people are saying you're just trying to get a big settlement from the city. One reporter called out. What do you say to that? Robert leaned into the microphone. I say those people don't understand what this is about. No amount of money can give me back the dignity I lost that night. No settlement can erase the fear my daughter felt watching her father being assaulted. This is about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Another reporter asked, do you think all police officers are bad? No, Robert said firmly. My brother is a police officer in another state. I know there are good cops out there doing their jobs honestly. But good cops shouldn't protect bad cops. The system that allows officers like Hansen to abuse their power for months or years, that's what needs to change. After the press conference, the media frenzy intensified. Robert's phone rang constantly. News outlets wanted interviews. Civil rights organizations wanted him to speak at events. Other cities dealing with similar issues reached out, hoping to learn from their case. The pushback came quickly, too. The police union held their own press conference defending the arrested officers and claiming they were being unfairly targeted. Some city council members questioned whether the FBI investigation was overreach. Online trolls intensified their attacks, digging into Robert's past looking for anything they could use against him. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. But that didn't stop them from making things up. The police chief, Morrison, initially refused to resign. He gave a defiant speech about supporting his officers and not bowing to pressure. But within 48 hours, evidence emerged that he'd personally dismissed at least 6 complaints against Hansen over the past 2 years. By the end of the week, he was forced out. The mayor appointed an interim chief and announced the formation of a civilian oversight board to review police conduct. It wasn't everything Catherine had asked for, but it was a start. Meanwhile, the criminal cases against Hansen and the other officers moved forward. Hansen's attorney tried to argue that the assault was justified because Robert had been verbally aggressive. Judge Patterson's video proved otherwise. The charges stood. Robert returned to work at Davidson Tech, but it was awkward. Some co-workers were supportive, patting him on the back and telling him he was doing the right thing. Others seemed uncomfortable around him, as if his newfound notoriety made them nervous. His boss called him into the office to discuss whether the media attention was affecting his work. I need to know you're still focused on your job here, his boss said carefully. I am, Robert assured him. But I also need to see this through. These court dates and meetings, they're important. I understand. Just try to keep it balanced, his boss said, though Robert could see the concern in his eyes. The company didn't want controversy. Sophie struggled too. Kids at school asked her constant questions. Some were curious. Others were cruel. A few parents complained that having Robert's daughter in class was disruptive, though the school principal shut that down quickly. Am I making things harder for you? Robert asked Sophie one night after she came home upset. No, Dad, Sophie said, wiping her eyes. What you're doing is important. I'm proud of you. even if it's hard sometimes. The hardest part was the waiting. Criminal trials take time, and the FBI investigation was still uncovering new evidence. Hansen's trial wouldn't start for months. The civil lawsuit would take even longer, but they kept fighting. Catherine filed motion after motion, pushing for transparency and accountability. Robert met with other victims, helping them prepare for their own testimonies. Agent Reeves kept them updated on the investigation's progress. 3 months after the assault, the FBI announced they'd uncovered evidence linking the corruption network to a city councilman who'd been taking bribes to keep complaints against certain officers buried. He was arrested, further shaking up the city's political landscape. How deep does this go? Robert asked Agent Reeves during one of their regular updates. Deeper than we initially thought, she admitted. But we're getting there. Every arrest leads to more evidence, more connections. You exposed something that a lot of powerful people wanted to keep hidden. Robert thought about that often. He'd just been a guy driving home with his daughter. He hadn't wanted to be a whistleblower or a crusader. But sometimes life doesn't give you a choice. Sometimes you're put in a position where you have to decide, stay silent and let injustice continue, or speak up and face the consequences. He'd chosen to speak up. And while it was hard, while it was exhausting and scary and overwhelming, he knew it was right. 6 months after the assault, Hansen's trial finally began. Robert sat in the courtroom, Catherine beside him, as prosecutors laid out their case. They had video evidence from multiple angles. They had Judge Patterson's testimony. They had Agent Chen's undercover reports. They had statements from 47 victims. Hansen's defense attorney did his best, but there wasn't much he could say. The evidence was overwhelming. When Robert took the stand, he looked directly at Hansen for the first time since that night. The officer looked smaller somehow, diminished. The aggression and arrogance were gone, replaced by a deflated. 18 months after that Thursday evening that changed everything, Robert stood in a community center auditorium, looking at the faces of nearly 200 people. They were all there for the same reason, the official launch of the Williams Foundation for Justice and Police Reform. The civil lawsuit had finally settled 6 months earlier. The city agreed to pay $12 million to the victims, with the largest portion going to those whose lives had been most severely damaged. But Robert had done something unexpected with his share. Instead of just taking the money and moving on, he'd used it to create a foundation dedicated to helping other victims of police misconduct. "We didn't go through all of this just to walk away," Robert told the crowd. "Every dollar we received represents someone's pain, someone's struggle. The least we can do is use it to help others." The foundation offered free legal assistance to victims who couldn't afford attorneys. It funded community education programs teaching people their rights during police encounters. It supported independent investigations into police misconduct. And it provided counseling services for families traumatized by police violence. Catherine had left her private practice to run the foundation full-time. She'd assembled a team of passionate attorneys and activists, all dedicated to the same cause. Thomas, the elderly Marine who'd been one of Hansen's victims, worked as a volunteer coordinator. Lisa, who'd lost her job over false charges, now helped other victims navigate the legal system. "The foundation is already helping people," Catherine told the audience. "In the past 3 months alone, we've taken on 42 cases across 5 different states. We've helped overturn 6 wrongful convictions. We've forced 3 police departments to implement body camera programs, and we're just getting started." The audience applauded. Robert saw familiar faces in the crowd. Judge Eleanor Patterson sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Agent Reeves was there, along with Agent Chen, who'd been promoted after his undercover work exposed the corruption network. Even some of Robert's neighbors from Maple Street had shown up to support him. The changes in the city's police department had been significant. The new chief, a reformer from outside the department, had implemented sweeping changes. All officers now wore body cameras that couldn't be turned off. An independent civilian review board investigated all complaints. Officers were required to undergo regular training on bias and de-escalation. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Hansen was serving his 8-year sentence at a federal prison 3 states away. The other officers involved in the corruption network had received sentences ranging from 3 to 12 years. The city councilman who'd taken bribes got 15 years. The systematic abuse that had terrorized residents for years was finally over. But the impact of Robert's case had spread far beyond their city. Similar investigations had been launched in other communities. Police reform had become a major political issue. Robert had testified before Congress twice, pushing for federal legislation on police accountability. Some of his recommendations had been incorporated into proposed laws still working their way through the system. Sophie, now 14, had become an advocate in her own right. She spoke at schools about knowing your rights and staying calm during police encounters. She'd written an essay about her experience that had been published in a major newspaper. Teachers used it in their classrooms to start discussions about justice and civil rights. "I used to be scared all the time after what happened," Sophie told the audience during her turn at the podium. "Every time I saw a police car, my heart would race. But my dad taught me that fear shouldn't stop you from doing what's right, and speaking up for justice is always right." The Foundation's first major initiative was a partnership with police departments willing to undergo comprehensive reform. They'd work with community members and officers together, building trust and creating accountability systems. 5 departments had already signed on. "We're not anti-police," Robert explained to a reporter covering the launch event. "We're anti-abuse. There are good officers out there who want to do the right thing. We want to support them while holding the bad ones accountable." The reporter asked the question Robert had heard 100 times. "Do you regret what happened that night? Would you change it if you could?" Robert thought about it carefully. "I regret that it happened at all. I regret that my daughter had to witness it. I regret that so many other people suffered before anyone did anything about it. But do I regret speaking up? No. Because if we'd stayed silent, Hansen would still be out there. Those other officers would still be abusing people. Nothing would have changed." After the speeches ended, people lined up to meet Robert and Catherine. Some were victims looking for help. Others were activists wanting to collaborate. A few were police officers who supported reform and wanted to be part of the solution. One young officer, barely out of the academy, shook Robert's hand nervously. "Mr. Williams, I joined the force because I wanted to help people. But after everything that's happened, I wonder if I made the right choice." "Don't quit," Robert told him. "We need good people like you in law enforcement. We need officers who understand that the badge is about service, not power. Stay. Do the job right, and hold your fellow officers accountable when they don't." The young officer nodded, looking relieved. "I will, I promise." As the evening wound down, Robert found himself standing outside the community center with Catherine and Sophie. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It reminded him of that Thursday evening 18 months ago when his life had changed forever. "You okay?" Catherine asked, taking his hand. "Yeah," Robert said. "I'm okay. Better than okay, actually." Sophie leaned against him. "Dad, do you think we really made a difference?" Robert looked back at the community center where people were still talking, networking, planning. He thought about the victims who now had legal representation, the families who were getting counseling, the officers who were receiving better training, the policies that were changing. "Yeah, baby. I think we did," Robert said. "Maybe not as much as we'd like. There's still a lot of work to do. But we started something, and that matters." The Foundation's work kept them busy. Robert had reduced his hours at Davidson Tech to spend more time on Foundation activities. He traveled frequently, speaking at universities, police academies, and community forums. He'd become an unexpected voice in the national conversation about police reform, but he always made sure to be home for dinner with his family. That Thursday evening tradition, picking up Sophie from piano lessons and eating together, had become sacred. It was their reminder that despite everything that had happened, despite the publicity and the pressure, they were still just a family trying to live their lives. 6 months after the Foundation launch, Robert received a call from the White House. The president wanted to meet with him and other police reform advocates to discuss potential federal legislation. It was surreal, sitting in the Oval Office, sharing his story with the most powerful person in the country. "What you've done matters," the president told him. "You've shown people that change is possible. That's standing up for justice. Even when it's hard, even when it's scary, can actually make a difference." The legislation they discussed that day would eventually pass, though in a watered-down form that disappointed Robert. But it was something. Body cameras became mandatory for all federal law enforcement. Funding was allocated for better training. A national database was created to track officers with multiple complaints. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. Back home, life slowly returned to a new normal. The media attention faded somewhat, though Robert's name still came up whenever police reform was discussed. Sophie excelled in school and was thinking about becoming a civil rights lawyer like her mother. Robert got promoted at work, his boss finally recognizing that his advocacy work reflected well on the company. The neighborhood on Maple Street had changed too. More diverse families had moved in, no longer afraid of being harassed. Neighbors who'd once stayed silent now spoke up when they saw injustice. The community had learned something important, that silence in the face of wrong is itself a kind of wrong. Judge Eleanor Patterson had become a close family friend. She often came over for Sunday dinners, sharing stories from her years on the bench and offering wisdom about the long fight for justice. Change is slow, she'd say, but it's cumulative. Every case, every victory, every person who speaks up adds to the momentum. Agent Reeves stayed in touch too. She'd moved on to other investigations, but she always made time to update Robert on cases related to their work. Several other corruption networks in different cities had been exposed using the playbook developed during their investigation. "You started a movement," Reeves told Robert during one of their catch-up meetings. "Departments across the country are watching what's happening here. Some are scared, some are adapting, but they're all paying attention." Agent Chen had become a trainer, teaching other undercover agents how to document misconduct safely and effectively. He'd written a manual based on his experiences, and it was now used by the FBI nationwide. "I couldn't have done it without you," he told Robert. "Your courage made it possible for me to do my job."